however, we are here to talk to you about backward design or understanding by design, so that you're able to think about what it is that you need to do when you're planning those lesson plans. Why is this called backward design? Well, keep in mind that when you're a beginning teacher or a new teacher, your instinct is you want to start with these cool activities that you found. I found this really cool thing. But what you really need to do is start with that end point in mind. What is it that the students need to be able to do? What is it they need to be able to know? Because if you start with the activities, odds are it's going to be disconnected, and that's where you're going to run into problems. So then we watched that short video where Wiggins and McTeague talked about what understanding by design is, or backward design, and what the outcomes are. So if you need a refresher, that's a good video to watch. There are three main steps when you are planning backwards design. And the first is you got to identify what your results are. What is it you want the students to be able to know? What is it they need to be able to do? And you also, while you're doing this, you need to think about what might be difficult for them to understand or do on their own, so that you know what you might need to scaffold or spend a little more time with so that they can understand the concept. So we looked at those two different lesson plans or unit plans, looking at Sarah Plain and Tall and the Westward Movement, and you looked at the major similarities and differences in the learning goals. And what you should have discovered from that is that oftentimes when you don't plan with the end in mind, your learning goals are very small and not overarching. So it takes some time for you to be able to look at take some time and be able to look at those and think of the differences that are there. There are two, in the second step, you should be able to determine their acceptable evidence. So how will you know that the students are going to get it? How will you be able to assess that they got it? And you really need to think about what counts as understanding in your classroom, because what counts in a social studies classroom might be vastly different than in a language arts or science classroom. Finally, plan those learning activities and instruction. What is it that you're going to use to make sure that the students understand that concept or topic that you're talking about? And how are these activities connected to that overall focus? And again, we looked at the two different types of lesson planning, and we looked at how the evidence changed. We looked at some of the different learning activities. And even though they had some very similar activities, you could tell in the second plan where they had thought about the end product and the end understanding rather than those small separate activities. And I said, when you're doing this, you've got to think where. The where is the where are we headed? What are the final things that students need to be able to walk away from? Then you got to hook those students. Think about that question that's going to get them thinking, or that activity that's going to get them really thinking about the broad part of the question. Also think about the explore. What is it that you're going to do to help students to be able to think about those concepts or topics, especially doing so on their own, spending some time exploring on their own. Rethinking how we work and our ideas. Remember that in your unit, students must be able to, or must have at least one day where they assess themselves and are able to think about how they can make adjustments to their understanding and learning. And finally, the evaluation piece, and this is where they evaluate, especially that final performance piece or that final summative assessment, so you can see exactly what students understand. So what must we think about when we're planning? All of those things. And then we did a 3-sentence summary where you thought about what backwards design is and how it's beneficial to learners.
Break.
We took a break.
When we came back, we addressed the dreaded question that every teacher hears more than once. Why do I have to learn this? What kids are really asking you when they say that is that they want to learn things that are relevant and meaningful. And so when we're thinking about the broad understandings or big ideas with backwards design, I asked you to think about what makes learning relevant and meaningful for you as a student. You shared ideas, and we came back, and it turned out that it was when things are connected to your own lives or the world outside the classroom. So big ideas and essential questions are what should provide the framework for your learning activities, your unit. It can even provide the framework for an entire course. Big idea. Then we looked at a list of essential questions and non-essential questions to see if we could figure out what the characteristics are of essential questions. And we agreed on these characteristics. Essential questions are open-ended, they are thought-provoking and engaging, they demand higher order thinking, they focus on important ideas or concepts, they can spark additional questions, and there's questions that we might ask ourselves over and over again because there's never really just one right answer. So the essential question for Methods 1 block this semester is, how can teachers design learning opportunities that will engage and empower middle school students? That's what we hope by the end of the course you can construct your own answer to. All right, there are the topical essential questions underneath our broad overarching essential question focus on things like multiple perspectives, designing learning activities for different types of learners, and creating a student-centered classroom. And that was about it. That's what we did as a brief introduction for essential questions. And then we're coming back the next week once you had your unit topic to write essential questions for your unit. We're done.